I want to talk to people who understand that it is absolutely essential that Donald Trump not win this election in November because it looks like that would probably be the end of American democracy, and at the very least, it would be the beginning of a very, very dark and probably very destructive period in our history. So, if you recognize that, I want to say it is really clear that there's only one acceptable course of action for you. And everybody who doesn't recognize that that means you got to vote for Joe Biden, I want to talk to because I want to talk to those people who recognize that everything is at stake, who understand that the only other person besides Donald Trump who might win the election and become president is Joe Biden, and who puts those two things together and realizes it's absolutely essential that everybody who wants to save American democracy vote for Joe Biden. I want to talk to those Republicans who are thinking, I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden for their own reasons, that they have this really negative view of Joe Biden and maybe a visceral feeling about voting for any Democrat. But they recognize that Donald Trump must lose. And I want to talk to those on the other side of the political divide who feel like he's not as appealing as a candidate as they like, and they can think of a third-party candidate who represents their values more fully. I want to show that neither of those courses of action are morally acceptable if you hold a morality where you take some responsibility for the consequences of your action. If a person doesn't vote, and if they vote for a third-party candidate, they're both the same thing. That's basically by not voting for Donald Trump, they have reduced his amount by one. But they haven't helped anything on the Biden side, and so they have helped the election by one. However, if you vote for Joe Biden, not only does Trump not get the vote, but Biden does get the vote. That's -1 and +1. They're two apart. You double your impact. Now, if you believe that it is absolutely essential that Trump not win, I think it follows that you are morally obliged to do whatever is in your power to prevent him from winning. And what sense does it make to vote for somebody who has no chance of becoming president if the essential task of the moment is to save American democracy from the force of fascism? I've dealt with the resistance that one can encounter when people are thinking they're going to vote their conscience or have voted their conscience. I had a piece in the Christian Science Monitor in 2003, I believe it was, trying to point out to the people who had voted for Ralph Nader back in 2000 that they were responsible collectively for the fact that George W. Bush, rather than Al Gore, became president. And the result of that was the war in Iraq, which almost everybody that I was trying to address that had voted for Ralph Nader recognized was a huge catastrophe for the United States and the world, and a lot of values that they hold dear. But the fact is, there were 97,000 votes for Nader, who had absolutely no chance of being elected president, and everybody should have known that. And those 96,000 votes, if they had gone to their second choice, which of the two people who actually had a chance of winning, Gore would have won by a very wide margin. They wouldn't have split evenly. Gore would have gotten most of the Nader vote. And then the state of Florida that Gore supposedly lost by a few hundred votes, he would have won by some thousands of votes out of that 97,000 that people that voted passed for Ralph Nader, thinking that Nader stood for what they believed in more. Well, but he was never going to be president, and that was what the issue was. and the consequences of their having indulged their belief in, let me vote for the person I admire the most, it was very costly for the United States and for the world, for 100,000 Iraqis, thousands of Americans. It was a disaster. People would respond to me when I put that out there in the world. Oh, but if Gore had only run a smart campaign, if he had been a good campaigner, well, he would have won. Well, that may be true. But I make a distinction between Gore doing the best he can, which was not all that terribly impressive about what kind of charisma he had as a candidate, and people who make a choice like Ralph Nader made and the people who voted for him made, to make it more likely that somebody like George W. Bush would become president, and that presidency turned out to be a real disaster, not just with respect to Iraq. There's a lot of damage that occurred because of that. And people wanted to make excuses, but I'm afraid that there are people out there now, maybe people who voted for Nader 24 years ago, maybe they're just another version of the same sort of moral perspective in which you don't have to take into account that your actions will have consequences on the world, and you're voting your conscience under our present system is a self-indulgent thing to do. I know some people who've talked to me about, oh, maybe they're going to vote for Cornel West. Well, if you want to save American democracy, there's something twice as good as of that to do. And I think that with everything at stake, democracy versus fascism really does amount to pretty much everything's at stake. We really got to go for the best impact that we can have. It's not the time to indulge oneself. You can write an op-ed or a letter to the editor expressing your values. This is about who's going to wield the powers of the presidency. So anybody on the Republican side who thinks that voting for a Democrat, God's going to strike him dead, or who thinks that Biden's some kind of terrible guy. I mean, he's not a terrible guy, but when people have been indoctrinated by right-wing propagandists, so that even Barack Obama seems like some kind of terrorist when he was the most decent guy to occupy the office for all of his shortcomings in fighting the fight. He was still a wonderful guy, but the Republicans have learned how to demonize Democratic presidents. Even the ones who are such fine people, like Joe Biden, that Lindsey Graham said was as good a person as God ever created. You wouldn't think that if you were living in the right-wing bubble where they demonize him. But anyway, I would say to them, not wanting to get into a discussion of deprogramming the demonization of Joe Biden, but just say it really doesn't matter. Well, he can be a lousy president. You may think he's a terrible person, but you know that he's going to allow another election in 2028 and allow another president to take office in 2029. So American democracy can survive whatever it is you think that Biden would be as president. It cannot survive fascism taking over. And if you understand that we cannot allow fascism to take over, we cannot allow Trump to regain the powers of the presidency because of all that he said that he would do, which is really ending the American experiment pretty much if he succeeds. You got to vote for Joe Biden. And there are going to be a lot of Republicans out there, I think, that'll be talking to Republicans. I saw Joe Walsh, former Republican congressman from Illinois, talking about this and saying that every Republican who's trying to tell people about Trump and warn them against him, the Nikki Haley crowd, the Chris Christie crowd, even the Liz Cheney crowd, those are people who are saying Trump is a danger to the survival of American democracy. They're not yet saying Joe Biden. And Walsh, this former Republican congressman, he wants to get a core of Republicans out there talking to Republicans, telling them, you got one sensible option, and everybody's got to be saying this, that the alternative to fascism is to vote for Joe Biden. He will continue American democracy. Thank you. By the way, my name is Andy Schmuckler. I'm a man on a mission. Would appreciate if you would follow me on this platform, and I would appreciate if you would check out my subscribe to my weekly, bi-weekly, twice weekly, whichever that word is, live stream podcast, A Man on a Mission. And I usually begin with something concrete, but my mission has got to do with providing a coherent big picture that I think could help American civil democracy and human civilization to survive. And both of them are now in significant peril. Thank you. Bye-bye.